you're never stuck with what you have. The surgery is the door that opens, and from there you've got great opportunity to move forward, because very often it solves the problem, or it gives us a window of opportunity for us to start the work. If we've been in significant amounts of pain previously, then the surgery changes that game completely, but it's just the first step towards the whole rest of your life, really. So
I asked Caz Hitchcock to come on the podcast to discuss a topic that I feel is not discussed often: scar tissue. I learned a lot from tapping into her knowledge about what scar tissue is and the role it plays in our bodies. We discussed the impact it can have in terms of how it affects our movement post-operatively or post-injury, as well as how it affects how we see our bodies and its capabilities for the future. From a scar tissue 101 through to her own personal journey through multiple surgeries when she was younger and her journey since, this conversation will inform, educate and inspire anyone who has suffered physical trauma or better understand someone close to them who is struggling. I started this conversation by asking some specific questions around what scar tissue actually is. Today we're talking about scar tissue or adhesions, and we thought it would be best to do a bit of a scar tissue 101, because we don't really hear a lot about scar tissue generally. It's not something that's particularly widely discussed. So Caz is going to take us through. I'm going to ask her a few questions and she's going to give me her best answers for a few of these 101 questions. So, Caz, how does scar tissue differ from non-scar tissue?
So scar tissue forms when we've got an injury to the body, or we've had a surgery, something like that. And it forms part of the inflammatory response, and it is a stabilizing force within the body. So it responds to injury. So where the brain sees that the body's had a compromised structure, then the scar tissue will come in and help to shore up the affected area. So yes, it knits it back together and we see the healing process happen, but it's also like scaffolding. It's like a reinforcing structure to the body as well. And it's a little bit more dense than your average fascial tissue. So I know you've talked about fascia on here before, so that lovely connective tissue of the body, and scar tissue is the same. I always liken it a little bit to elastic bands. So if your body's made up of elastic bands that are all stretchy and fresh, then adhesions and those sort of scar tissue is a little bit more like the older elastic bands, a little bit, they just need a little bit more care.
Yes, I know that, absolutely. And sometimes I know the feeling of that as well.
Yes. Yes.
So it develops always then because of injury.
Yeah, so we can get internal adhesions are actually quite interesting, because we have found, so I work a lot in the dissection lab with my teacher, and looking at different instances of where adhesions have occurred, particularly in the abdominal cavity. And we know that you don't actually have to have a cut or an injury as such. Just things like horse riding. If you've been repeatedly galloping with a horse, that can get quite rough. And whenever the internal organs are really being joggled about, then, the brain will look into the body and say, right, okay, well, we don't want that moving, past its end range. Because, there are measures set down in the body for optimal, in the body by the brain for optimal range of movement. So if something is moving in such a way that it could cause injury to a certain part of us, then, we can start to have scar tissue lay down. So we see that quite a lot.
Protectively.
Very much so. Very much so. It's
Okay.
a defensive mechanism. So, sometimes if we come back to like horse riding or something like that, then, maybe the intestines are moving around in a way that, the brain thinks, well, we don't want that going up over there. So
No.
they bind together. So really adhesions internal adhesions, particularly when we think about those, they're sort of, a binding force
Mm.
that helps to stabilize structures. So,
That's interesting, because then my next question was, can it ever benefit the body? And in that sense, where it's talking about stabilizing so that things aren't all sort of getting in the wrong place, or moving in a way that is going to compromise that tissue, then that is slightly beneficial. Is that right?
yes, absolutely. And we need adhesions and we need scar tissue. Otherwise, we would not be able to go through the processes that many of us have been through. You would not be able to go for surgery and the body repair itself adequately, and then we move on from that event without these sort of stabilizing forces that the body introduces into itself. So it's an integral part of our healing process. It's very important that we have those. Um,
Mm.
so
Um, and can they in themselves, whether internally or externally, then create pain because of the restriction of them? Because obviously, you're going back to your old elastic band analogy. Obviously, that comes across as feeling very creaky and rigid and stiff.
yeah, there's two aspects to the pain question there. The first one, of course, that you've touched on is, when we've got adhesions and they start to restrict our movement in a certain way, and that's where you want to work very carefully and intelligently with your elastic bands, whether that's within a manual therapy environment or a movement environment. To Because it is possible to restore your range of movement if we go in there and we're careful with our elastic bands. The other thing that is really important to touch on there is that your scar tissue is living tissue, like all other fascias in the body. So it is innervated, it has its own blood, it has its own endocrine, hormone system running through it. So it's alive, and it's got a felt sense to it.
Yeah.
So whereas we might feel, particularly externally, if we've had surgery, whereas we might feel that the nerve endings in the skin have been broken, so we might have patches of numbness in our skin sensors, we might find that because of scar tissue laydown, we've got perhaps an increase in sensitivity in that area because we've got more sort of more nerve running through the fascial structures there. I think that does that make sense?
It
Sort of
does make sense. No, it does make sense.
external felt sense and internal felt sense.
Felt sense. Yes.
But
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're receiving messages from two different structures of the body.
It reminds me slightly as well of calluses, where callus, you kind of would almost feel a callus almost as a sort of a dead area because it's thick and hard, and yet again it's important. It's a protective thing, isn't it? And it obviously, but it still has the, as you say, the blood flow, and you can still feel through it, and yet it can feel, particularly on feet, people really recognize it as this sort of inhibiting thing on the feet, and yet it's very protective. And if we were not wearing shoes, if we were still back in the old hunter-gatherer days, then calluses are really important for that protective nature of our skin. So, I can see some parallels there. Can scar tissue change over time?
Yes, we are a highly intelligent self-healing organism, and we are constantly changing. We change with so many different factors. So there's environmental factors, obviously the aging factor. Sorry, everybody. There's the hormonal factor, of course.
Mhm.
Particularly for women as we go through certain stages of life. The clients that I work with, a lot of clients that sort of get to sort of 40, 50, and that niggly thing that they were putting up with, suddenly with the hormonal shift in the body, suddenly feel that their pain levels can increase significantly, just for no doesn't if it doesn't seem apparent. I won't say for no reason at all, but I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, it just came out of the blue, or it's just suddenly become intolerable. And that's because of an internal hormone shift. But we all know people, and including ourselves, who've got injuries and surgeries, and of course, depending on the weather, So, when
Yes.
it's cold, wet, and rainy, your scar tissue is far less malleable or pliable or workable than it is than when you're, laying on a beach, for example. All of a sudden it seems it's very easy. Our movement,
Yeah.
our slide and glide feels much, much
Yes.
easier. And
That's
so,
not just a
yes.
mental thing because you're having a nice break.
There again, of course, there's
A
always
little bit of that.
there is a neural aspect to it that, yes, we are nice and relaxed, but, we know that connective tissue responds to environmental factors. So it's always governed by how much humidity, how much heat, how much cold we've got around us.
Yeah. So the UK is not
Mm.
the best place for us then.
It's not,
We
do
all
you
want to
know?
hit Spain instead.
I've just tested this with my dad. So my dad has worked very hard his whole life, up and down ladders his whole life, and his knees are not in great shape. He's had surgeries on both knees. And in just, as he's reaching sort of late 60s, he's just the creakiness of the knees, the knee pain has just been steadily increasing. And then last year he realized his dream with his partner. He's moved to Cyprus. And I took him on a really cold, wet, rainy day in October last year to Gatwick, and he was really struggling to get out of the car. His knees it was quite distressing. And I went to see him in Cyprus about a month later. He's sea swimming, he's walking on the beach, complete lifestyle overhaul. It's also a very balmy 32, 33 degrees. And I said to him, how are you feeling? And he said, you will not believe my knees. And
Oh,
yes, there is a
really?
change in sort of lifestyle and exercise there, but also, you cannot get away from the sunshine element of it all. That
Mm.
just being in that warm, dry environment has made such a difference to something that has really given him quite a lot of pain for fair few decades now.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Um, and when we do have scar tissue,
Mm.
is it something it's really key for the body in terms of healing, recovering from um, operations and so on. But is it something that we should aim to get rid of?
I'm really of the opinion that, like I say, we are highly intelligent, self-healing organism. And with regards to that, sort of the body, all the way up to sort of the eye line, is highly intelligent. Everything above that, right up to the top of your head, thinks it is.
I love that.
So, you know,
Oh, perfect.
I love to come back, with myself and with my clients a lot, because, we like to intervene. We
Mm,
impose our own will on the body, and we have these ideas that we think we know how things work, but also there is an element to us where maybe we think we know a bit better.
mm.
So, but at the end of the day, your brain and your body that has come through millions of years of evolutionary process put that thing there for a reason in
Yeah,
its infinite wisdom. So actually, we always want to be working with our bodies rather than against them, or
lovely. Yeah,
trying to push and pull them around. So, you know, the scar tissue is there for a reason. In regular health, I would say regular healthy cycle, your body will only lay down exactly what it needs. Now, in my case, and we'll get into that a little bit later, that's not the case. I produce far too much scar tissue, and I'm
okay.
still producing that, but that's a genetic issue. So for your average person, the body
Yeah,
will only lay down exactly. If you cut your finger, you don't end up with a big bumpy thing on the end of your finger. Normally, you don't end up with a big bumpy thing on the end of your finger. It just heals itself nicely and dissipates once the healing process is complete. So really, we never want to be getting rid of anything, but we do want to be working with ourselves, because if we go in the other direction, for example, and we immobilize completely, and we
yeah.
start, we can get into defensive movement patterns and restricted movement patterns because we've been through a trauma. And that happens a lot for us because, we can go through some some not very nice experiences with, different illnesses and surgery journeys, and that can push us down a path of restricted movement.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, we want to be moving in a way that is intelligent and working with our body to keep things mobile, to keep things moving fluidly as much as we can. So we want to work with that scar tissue laydown. We don't want to immobilize and just allow it to build up into a big clump somewhere, because long term that's not going to be useful.
So on that point then, obviously that's what I feel is really pertinent to this podcast particularly, because again, a lot of my clients have had operations previously, injuries and so on. And obviously there's the scarring that you can see, and then there's the scarring, as you have talked about, internally that you can't see, that is then going to affect the way that person moves, affect their gait patterns, and affect every type of movement, their alignment, their general balance. So talk to me a little bit about how scarring can affect movement, and then moving on to how can we assess ourselves whether we are producing some compensatory movement patterns that are not going to serve us.
That's a really big question.
It's a big question, isn't it? Okay, let's chop back. Let's just chop back to the how can it affect movement.
So depending on where the surgery is, depending on how the scar tissue is being laid down, like I say, we have to go through our healing process. But once we've been through that, then we can start exploring through the body, and you can feel,
Can I ask, would you mean for you, is that stage once you're out of pain from the injury, surgery, trauma of any kind, as in acute pain, let's say?
Yeah, it's different for everybody, but the general rule of thumb is about 6 weeks post-surgery. It just allows times for the tissues to knit, and but also, again, refer back to my own experience on that. I'm a really slow healer, so
And I
I
was
have to
about to
leave
say,
my stitches in
sorry.
for a good 10 to 14 days. So at 7 days, and I've had this before, we've taken stitches out and things have, opened back up again because the healing process is not complete. So again, your surgery journey, your healing journey, your body is as unique to you as your
Very
fingerprint.
individual. Yeah.
And, what we all want to be developing on a regular basis is our awareness of ourselves, and developing our interoception, awareness of how we feel inside, and starting to really, it's tricky because when you know something, like I heal very slowly, I've had to request quite strongly, let's put it that way, from my healthcare practitioners that we leave stitches in for a little bit longer, because of previous experience and those things. So, but being able to identify how we work and then what we need, and then to be able to articulate that well, is a very powerful tool. It brings us back to autonomy over our own body's responsibility for our own health, which is always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to then the once you've got to that point that you're
Yes.
starting to remember your movement, if you like, you're feeling a little bit more confident, you're doing
Yes.
more, you're feeling out of the sort of throes of the post-operative recovery stage.
Yes.
So then from that point onwards, I suppose it's interesting to look at it from the perspective of someone who has just recovered,
Yeah.
and how to work at that stage. And then secondly, someone for whom the operation was a distant memory, but they still don't feel right in their movement. They feel inhibited.
Yes. So there's two aspects that we must consider when we're starting to return to movement, and the way that we move and the way that we're allowed to move. And I say allowed because the brain governs everything. And the brain's perfect question over and over is this safe? So we consider the body movement and what restrictions there may be there, and then to restore optimal range of movement, it's we would find that edge to where the movement is starting, or we're starting to run into resistance. So there's a feeling aspect to it, but it is overlaid by the brain's constant question, is this safe? Because whilst consciously we've been asleep for surgery, and of course the same for injury, because the brain does disconnect at that point. Otherwise, some people faint if the injury is severe. And whilst that looks very dramatic, it's just the brain going, I'm not going to process this right now. Sleep.
Yeah. Too much.
Okay, sleep.
Too much.
And but the question that it asks constantly is this safe? So whilst we're working with the body, in my work, we use gravity and the ground and breathing. They're all gentle yet very reliable components that we can keep coming back to. So testing out ranges of movement via just laying on the ground. We do a lot of laying on the ground or standing against walls, using things that support the body. But it supports the body on a physical level, but it also supports the brain with it. Is it safe? Can I proceed? Is it safe? Can I proceed? And we keep reassuring. And, it's a little bit like returning to something after we've been away for a while. We might approach that a little cautiously, and it's the same approach as we should be when we're post-surgery or post-injury. And there's an acceptance piece there as well. I hear a lot from my clients, I want to get back to how I was before the surgery. You can't. It's a physical impossibility because the conditions within your body have changed. So we do have to sit with that and do the work to become okay with the process, the journey that we've been through, and then work positively towards, great range of movement, and then, incorporating what we have into, or incorporating what's happened into our body, so that we can work together with our brand new shiny body. So I say that a lot. People, people sort of fall about laughing and go, doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
But we can't wish that things are different than they already are. I've always got in the background behind me, I've got Dave and Steve, my skeletons, and there's a pair of them together simply because of that, because they're both cast from an original skeleton. And generally, we think there's only about 12 of those in the world. So every time you walk into a doctor's office or anywhere medical, you are seeing Dave and Steve. And what we have to accept is that your body is as unique to you as your fingerprint. There's no one else like you. Your genetic hereditary, your cellular makeup, your history. There's nobody like you. And it's to be celebrated, but it's also to be acknowledged and respected that, we have all been through our own unique experiences. So we want to start where we are, use what we have, and do what we can, and move through the processes of just exploring this brand new shiny body again. And it's not just post-surgery and post-injury where we can do that. We can do that sort of as we go through the menopause.
Absolutely.
And so many different life transitions, when we're postpartum, again, is another place of, if you've never had a baby before, we know, come away from having a baby, you got a whole new body that moves in a very different way. And, so there is always a process to go forwards. And actually, it is a brand new shiny body because scar tissue has some really unique qualities, but it's also some really useful and beautiful qualities that, there's always a saying that if you break a bone and the bone knits back together, that's the strongest bone in your body. So can we take these experiences and say, yes, yes, I might have a scar there, but that helps me to have a heightened sense of awareness, whether that's a spatial awareness or a proprioceptive awareness or an internal awareness. So they're great things.
I love that. And it's all about acceptance of where you are right now. Because, as many people say, the past is in the past, and a comparison with that is unfair. But also, having too high or the wrong expectations of your future is also, or trying to rush towards a future goal that you're uncertain you'll achieve. These are all very negative on our movement patterns. And from my own personal experience, that acceptance of where you are now allows you to build, because it's that sort of self-kindness, the self-compassion that's so important to effectively, as you're saying, tell your brain, tell your nervous system, it's okay to move. And yes, we're in this position, but as you say, we'll work together rather than against. And I love that, because it's often the way that we talk about our situation, if it is a difficult situation, can be so negative. And even hearing the way we talk about our own situation, our own words into our own brain, we're giving such negative messaging, that can be really detrimental, particularly to that sort of automatic protective feeling and the fear of what might happen. And I think when you've been through a trauma or something, then it's very natural to have those very negative emotions. But one of the first steps of moving forward is being aware that they are just that. They are negative emotions, but they're not something that necessarily has to define our path forward. So I love your positivity around that, and it feels very enabling for people to be able to progress. So going back to people who have had some trauma, that has created scar tissue in the dim and distant past, but they never feel like they've quite got past it, or they haven't felt enabled or encouraged, or they haven't been supported by someone externally to help them move forward. Is that it for them, or is there hope?
There is always hope. There is always, like I say,
Correct answer. I'm glad you said that.
I will say it again. You have a highly intelligent self-healing organism body that is built for longevity, and it is built to support you. And I think what's really important to acknowledge is that while you were asleep, was such a small part of your brain that was asleep for whatever you were going through. The rest of you was wide awake. Your nervous system and your subconscious was all wide awake, and it was present for whatever you went through. And that is stored down in your bodies as a real memory. So we'll come into my story, but I'd had 3 major surgeries by the time I was 22. And when I got to the age of 30, it was just, there was something wrong, like a shudder in the system or something like that. And I think,
tell us more about your story, because I think it's
I will.
perfect time.
Yes. Yeah, but I think just to finish that point, it's so important that we acknowledge that whilst anesthesia makes us look like we're asleep, there's only a small part of us that is. So when we've got things that may be in the dim and distant past, we still have reverberations, sometimes shadows in the system, or shudders in the system, shudders in the nervous system from things that, yes, happened a long time ago, but for a system that's in high alert, it remembers it like it was yesterday. So it's not psychosomatic, and I hate that word so much, but it's not you making things up. If you don't feel like you're making progress, this is not just all in your head. If you don't feel like you're moving forward, or you're making progress in the way that you would like, or you keep feeling like you're going backwards, or you keep running into brick walls, then it's not you. It's, there's things in there that need to be cleared down, and working with somebody to achieve that is definitely the way forward. You want to be working with your body. And again, a lot of that stuff comes back to, the brain isn't getting the answer it wants. It's saying, is it safe? And the body, the nervous system, is coming back to the brain going, absolutely not, because this thing happened to us, and now we're unable to move forward. So You know,
Yeah.
I think that's a really important for, because it's not something that's generally acknowledged in our
No, you're right.
modern things. We fix the physical problem, but we don't always address everything else that's been going. And if you've been poorly for a long time on the run up to the surgery, it feels a little counterintuitive, because you get out the other side and you're like, hey, in my case, now you're going to live great. And then when you get down the line, it's like, but still something is wrong. And that can feel
Mm.
a little disheartening, because you feel like you've been poorly, you've been through a process, and now you should be on top of the world. But that hasn't quite happened. And, I think
Mm.
it's important to touch on that.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So tell me about your surgeries then, if you're happy to do so.
yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, lucky me. That's how I felt at the time. Um, I was born with a congenital kidney issue with blockages in both kidneys, and we didn't know that. So I started getting symptoms when I was about 9 years old, sort of, achy, dull, achy pains in my back, predominantly on the right side, and just feeling very poorly from time to time, but we couldn't quite put our finger on. It was so sporadic, couldn't really put our finger on what it was. And then around the age of 12, things just suddenly accelerated and got worse very, very quickly. And I was sent off for a special scan, and they identified that I had a cauliflower head for a right kidney, and the left kidney wasn't doing so great, but it wasn't as badly affected. Um, and that was when I ended up in my own doctor's office saying, this is a big problem, because
Mm.
when you go into, or when I was due to go into my final growth spurts, would the kidneys hold up over time to support me
Right.
as a functioning adult? And the prognosis was probably not, no. So I underwent my first big surgery, which was because the general idea then was that we'll try and keep both organs as much as we can. The idea was they would widen the tube where the blockage was in the right kidney and see if they could alleviate the pressure, and then hopefully the kidney would be able to function at some sort of a level. So that's what we did, and I ended up with an 11-inch scar that runs almost from my navel to my spine.
Wow.
And back then, and I say back then because this is very early 90s, which is probably me showing my age, it was kind of a standard. I went in, had this big surgery, I was in there for quite a long time, got sorted out, and then they give you a lovely handshake and they say, oh, thanks for popping in, we've saved your life, see you later. No 6 sessions of physio, none of the things that we have now. And I know from talking with other parents, I have a 17-year-old daughter, but talking to other parents with children that have had intervention, they also do psychiatric work. So a lot of children now have a psychiatrist that works
Mm.
alongside them. And that was really reassuring to hear that these services are becoming available to work with the body and the mind
Mm.
post-op. And sadly I didn't get that, so off to school I trot. And at 15 my mum notices that I'm starting to go rather lopsided,
Right.
and she took me to yoga, which then turned into my career, and what I do forms the basis for what I do now. The surgery didn't work, sadly. So at 19 years old, I started presenting with symptoms again, more scans, more looking at the kidney, and the kidney was failing. So unfortunately, we had to wait for it to fail, which took a few months.
Why
Um,
did you have to wait for it to fail?
they
That
are
sounds drastic.
they are medical guidelines. So we are only allowed to remove organs when they are functioning below a certain percentage, and there has to be a
Right.
cut-off for that, because otherwise
Oh.
it's a grey area. And really, coming back to the universe put that there for a reason.
Mm.
We are built through, for a purpose. So really, if we can retain the organ, then we want to do that.
Yeah.
Sadly, kidneys, when they go wrong, like other filters in the body, so livers and things. When they decide they don't want to work, you don't look very well because they're not, filtering the toxins out of the body as they should be. So with the kidney failed, and at 20, I was back under the knife, and another 7-inch scar into the front of my tummy this time. And it was already noted by the surgeon at that point that there was an awful lot of scar tissue, because he had wanted we can do kidney removal now via keyhole, which is a wonderful thing. And he took a look at me and on the table and just said, we can't get anywhere near anything. There's so much scar tissue in here.
Hence your lopsidedness.
Yes, and just the fact that I'd had complete, core collapse on that side, just because, I was a 15-year-old school kid. I wasn't going to exercise classes. I did. I went to hatha yoga with my mum, with lots of this stretchy, breathy stuff in a drafty school, which, it's but it was good for me. And, you haven't met my mum, so I was going. It was a non-negotiable. But yeah, so in I went again, and the surgeon at the time said that they'd removed quite a lot of scar tissue as well as the kidney. The operation was a success. I went in a fetching shade of grey with an organ that was poisoning me, and came out a fetching shade of pink, having had
amazing
major surgery.
Yeah,
but still looking far better with the failing organ out. And then about 2 years after that, I ran into trouble again, in that I was losing the rotation for my body, and I couldn't reverse my car, and I was really struggling to look over my shoulder, and I was having problems with my hip and problems with my right shoulder and tennis elbow in that right side, and all sorts of stuff was happening. And I went back to the consultant and just said, look, something's really not quite right. I was losing range of movement rapidly, and they had a look at me. And the problem with adhesions is all the imaging equipment that is available to us is for looking through tissue so that we can see organs and bones.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to see scar tissue, because it's living, tissue that we want to look through that. So we haven't actually got an imaging system yet that enables us to be able to see them
that's
without.
Fascinating. I've never thought about it from that perspective.
Yes, so it makes us a little bit tricky to deal with. So anyway, off I went to a lovely surgeon, another consultant who specializes in this stuff, and he took one look at me and said, yeah, we know exactly what this is. And it turned out that there are two types of scar tissue, genetic scar tissue issues. One of them is called keloid scarring, and we can identify that. So if you've got a scar, generally on the tummy area, they tend to be more prevalent. It's also very prevalent in people of color. So you get sort of a wide scar that is quite flat and bumpy. It's this sort of, it's like
so it's much more raised,
like a rumply tissue paper would be sort of like the thing. So I'd had staples for my first surgery, then it had left me with something that was almost 1/4 of an inch wide, and it was this raised, sort of very shiny, very bumpy scar. And of course that was just the very tip of the iceberg compared to what on earth was going on the inside. So, and the other scar tissue, genetic scar tissue issue, is hypertrophic scarring, and that is lacking an off switch. So the brain senses trauma, the body senses trauma, switches on the scar tissue response, the inflammatory response that causes scar tissue to be produced. It's just not sure when to switch it back off again. So the body has a tendency to stay in an inflammatory response. And of course, we know from all the dietary nutrition and all, the lifestyle information that's available to us now, that we don't want the body to be in this inflammatory response all the time. It's a stress response.
And can I ask a question there? So if someone is post-surgery and they're well beyond that sort of 6 weeks, it's extending out because and the area still feels very hot and so on, which would normally be signs of inflammation.
Mm.
Is that, at what point does that become a sign that perhaps that internal scarring is too much and that perhaps it is hypertrophic,
You'll see it on the outside first.
right?
Scar tissue tends to take between 2 and 5 years to fully form and to complete its process. So it's
Right.
quite a long time.
Yeah.
We have this. We've got quite an unforgiving cultural and societal norms where you just sort of you have something done and then it's the same with birthing babies, isn't it? You have a couple of months off and then it's back to work and business as normal. And that's indicative of so many different areas of our life. But just because we're 6 weeks post-op
Yeah.
doesn't mean we're back to
Very
firing
fresh.
on all
Yeah.
cylinders. This is now we can start picking up cups of
Okay.
tea and start to get back to
Yes.
something that looks a bit like normal. But a little bit like postpartum, the body needs time to process and recover what's been going on, and generally the scar tissue cases that I work with regularly, they're starting to run into issues somewhere between the 2 and 5 year mark.
Right.
So for breast cancer and mastectomy, breast cancer survivors, people, ladies that have had mastectomy, they're starting to lose their range of movement. But generally, that's about 2 years
Oh,
post-op.
interesting.
So
Okay.
long after your physio and everything has
Yeah.
finished.
When you would not have the expectation that it would be changing over time,
Yes.
and becoming a limitation. Yeah, that's very interesting. Okay,
Yes.
sorry. So back to
Yeah.
you. That was a quick one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So yes. So I went and had a chat with this consultant. Had a radical adhesionectomy where they went in, took all the scar tissue out, which was stuck all over the right side of my organs. And his words, not mine, and I'm going to show my age. Put in a sheet of bounce. If you remember the sheet of bounce that went into your
Dryer. Yeah.
dryer to stop your washing sticking together, to keep the muscles and the skin separate
Right.
and the superficial fascia separate, because everything had been stuck together, which was what had restricted my movement. Because if you woggle, the technical term, woggle the skin backwards and forwards on the back of your hand, there's a
A
finite
glide.
range to it,
Yeah.
but there is a glide to it. And
Yeah.
in with scars, a lot of the time that can be lost, and can also be regained by self massage and those other things. So there is a lot that we can do to support ourselves. But the problem that I had after that was obviously identifying that I had a scar tissue issue. The prognosis after that was sort of every 5 to 7 years, when the adhesions became life limiting, we go in and repeat the process. And at 23 years old, I just decided that this was not the way forward for me. It wasn't, just wasn't a way that I wanted to continue on. And I wanted to look at a different way, rather than just because every time I cut myself, we start the process again. So
Yeah.
to me, it didn't seem logical to keep coming back and triggering the process again if we
That was
could
very insightful of
work in a
you
different
at a
way.
young age. That's impressive.
Yeah, it must have been the other me.
Lots
Or
of
just
tea.
a natural, not belligerence, but just
No,
an
you're
inability to accept that
but
that
but
thing.
also responding to your insides. Literally, you had a gut feeling that this was not right, and you decided to at least investigate it. So that's brilliant. And I think sometimes we can be very limited um, by our curiosity about other options for so many things. And particularly when it's around your own body, your own health, your movement, how you feel. I think we really do know best a lot of the time when something really isn't right. And it's worth always a bit of a search, isn't it, to find out, to say,
Definitely.
and perhaps a bit of that belligerence, a bit of a refusal to accept is a
Yes.
good thing, because then at least it gets you researching, and perhaps finding something that's out there that you didn't know about, which I've certainly found in my past when recovering from my injury. Um, I didn't know what I didn't know. No one knows what they don't know until you go looking to try and work out and bring in that awareness. So yeah, I think that was brilliant.
Yeah. And I think previous experience also, you know, can bring us into those decisions a lot more. So if I had never had surgery before, then I probably would have been slightly more accepting. But having been in the NHS system for the best part of 10 years at that point, I
Yeah.
knew the systems well, was kind of on first name terms with a lot of the consultants and anaesthetists, and, spend a lot of time there. So with that in mind, it was a more of a two-way conversation, but also having a very supportive family. So, you know, my mum's always supported me with my choices, and also another another human with a very inquiring nature. I was in neurology, just had the kidney removed, and I had to go back to see my consultant. And I was sitting in the waiting room, and I said to the lady next to me, sort of half jokingly, "What are you in for?" And she said, "Oh, I've had my kidney removed." And I said, "Oh, really? Okay. What was wrong with
Snap.
yours? What was wrong with yours?" And she said, "I have no idea."
Ah, ah.
And that was kind of my first experience of somebody who had not really taken a line of inquiry into their own body. And it's not our fault, because we're not taught this.
Mm.
Um, and in some cases, if you go back to like my nan's generation, you don't question anything. You just nod, smile, and go, "Yes, you
Especially
know
not the
best."
doctor.
Oh no, 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 no. So with that in mind, but I was always very, inquisitive. Being 12, it was like, well, what is wrong with my kidney?
Mm.
And I learned all about PUJ obstructions and all of this stuff. And said to a GP once, he said, "Oh, what was wrong with your kidney?" I said, "Oh, I had a PUJ obstruction. Ended up having a pyeloplasty and then right nephrectomy in 2003." And he just said,
Wow.
again in English.
I love that. Yeah.
um,
Can we get rid of the acronyms, please? Yeah. Ah.
so
But yeah, that
you know,
shows you owned it. You owned it. You knew what it was about. You wanted to understand it.
have an
Yeah.
active interest in your own
Yeah.
body. It's not to say that you know any better than the really important, surgeons and consultants and people that we work with. And we do. We're so lucky here in the UK that we have some of the best surgeons in the world. But what I found was, the more I educated myself, the more it's always been a two-way conversation. I
Mm.
have not sat in a consultant's office and been talked at in a
Yeah.
very, very long time. And I think it's important that we feel empowered to be able to sit and have these conversations with the people who are here to support us and here to help us, but also
Yeah.
that we can ask questions and feel that we have a space where we can ask questions and have them answered to our satisfaction.
Yeah, that's very true. Answer to our satisfaction is key, because often you can have some acronyms and some jargon thrown back
Oh,
at you that
yes.
you really don't understand, and it's fine to then go back and say, sorry, I don't understand that, please rephrase it in a way that I will understand. Yeah, my
Yes.
my son, I think I might have mentioned to you, my son recently broke his leg,
Yes.
and I loved the way the consultant talked directly to him about what was happening with his leg, um, because then I understood it fully because it was being directed at a child. And I
Yeah.
thought, you know what? Sometimes actually that's the way to go.
Yes.
Is always it's not patronizing. It's just informing in a way where there was question and answer. What do you know about what's happened? And it was
Yes.
a really a two-way thing. And I thought that was really good.
Yeah.
My son aside. so, so so since then, that obviously, you decided, like, we're not doing that again. I'm not going to be going under the knife on a regular basis throughout my life, which
If we can help it.
If we can help it. That seems like a very sensible thought process. So how did you change that pattern for yourself?
I had to go where my brain didn't want to go, which was into the affected area. And I had to get, again, comes back to what we were talking about earlier. I had to accept what had happened. And that was tricky in places. I went into counselling when I was about just after I was 30. And I chose to go and see the counsellor because at the time I was going through divorce. But I'd always had this thing where just something wasn't quite right in the system. I jumped at things that, wouldn't make other people quite so jumpy. I often felt a little hypersensitive emotionally. I felt hypersensitive in my body. I just felt like something was always in emergency mode. It wasn't life limiting, but it was just kind of just a feeling of something in the background. So, off I trot to see, to meet my first ever lovely counsellor. And I said, I think it's because I'm getting divorced. And she said, I think it's because you've got PTSD.
Right.
And I'd never heard that word before. I had, no idea what that meant. But as soon as she explained to me that, you don't just get to go in for major surgery as a child. When we're an adult, we can kind of bargain with ourselves and we can see the logic and the rationale behind what we're going to do. The joint is worn out, we're going to replace it. Something in your body isn't working, we're going to replace it. We don't have that logical rationing available to us as a child. So the brain can't quite get its head round it. So for me and my body's infinite wisdom, it had laid that down as a quite significant trauma. And it was interesting because my subsequent surgeries didn't really register on the radar for me, but that younger one that just kept coming back through. So there was trauma in the tissues, if you like, on that one, and my body had stored stuff down into the tissues that it was always ready for it to happen again, just in case. So I was running on a bit of emergency mode there. So working through that, then that allowed me to start to keep, initially through the processes of yoga, to keep coming back and dropping into the body. And I use the word yoga in its traditional sense, not the Google sense. So if you Google yoga, you'll see what I mean. But actually the process of yoga is to be able to drop into your body, develop the awareness of your internal messages, watch your mind and all the things that it's getting up to, and connect the two together, bring them back together. So that involved me moving into the part of my body, into the right side, that I wasn't really keen on. But also over the years had developed an identity all of its own. It was something I protected very fiercely. I'd already made a decision as to whether or not I could or could not do something, particularly movements. Oh, I don't do that. I had surgery once, so it was a real,
very interesting. You create a whole narrative around it.
Absolutely. And that keeps us stuck, because while we're always referring back to the thing that once happened to us, it prevents us from moving forwards into a life that's free. So I worked with a very skilled teacher at the time, one-to-one. I was always leaving. It was very frustrating. And at times we had great progress and great gains, but there was, some frustrating moments in there as well. And every time I was going to leave, that's it. I'm never coming back to see this woman and her blooming movement. But I always had one ticket left. So I was going to go, right, I will go next week. And then that's it. I'm never going back. And, 15 years later, I was still under her guidance. But listening intently to what's going on, that's something that we can do this together. Actually, if you breathe into your body, feel your clothes. So you can feel your outer garments, then you can feel your undergarments, and you feel the waistband on your trousers or your skirt, whatever you can feel. But 30 seconds ago, you weren't even aware that you were wearing clothes.
Absolutely.
So your brain is aware of these things all the time. And to keep you safe, it will stop you long before you have strayed into territory where you might be damaging yourself. But we have the ability to not pay attention to these things. So when we keep dropping back in there and becoming aware of these things, we can satisfy the brain that actually, look, we're here.
It's
Nothing bad
okay.
happened. It's
Yes.
okay. We keep coming back to, is
Yeah.
it safe? Yes, it is. Is it safe? Yes, it is. And it's a real practice, not a perfect, because we just
This
have to keep
resonates
coming back to
so much with me from my um chronic pain cycle. We're not even talking about chronic pain, but it's exactly the same thing where I even became very conscious of my brain checking in all the time about whether, so how's the pain right now? Are you safe? Should you do this?
yeah,
And it was almost like an alter ego sat on my shoulder. It was like a second brain that was talking to me incessantly.
yes,
And I responded every time. I couldn't help but respond. It was almost like a little doctor saying, "So where are we today? Where are we? Where's your pain level between 1 and 10?" And once I started to move past that, I can ignore the question, and that ignoring the question helped me to then just move. And
yes,
say, actually, it's not necessarily to be asking anymore. So it's very
yes.
paralleled with what you're saying.
It's so important that we acknowledge, the neuro side of things. It's not just a physical body that we are dealing with. And I think, that's really starting to come through in our conversations now, but sort of 10
Yeah.
years ago, it was completely unheard of. 20 years ago, totally unheard of. It was just like, we fixed your physical body. Thanks for popping in, goodbye.
And yet,
Um,
actually, I was speaking to a psychiatrist, the lifestyle psychiatrist. She calls herself Charlotte Marriott on this podcast. And interestingly, I think she said it was about 100 years ago, um, the psychology and psychiatry were the same thing. And then because the disciplines got separated out, then we started seeing the mind and body separately. So it's actually only been for about 100 or so years. I don't quote me on that.
yes.
Um, so actually, it's just quite a small passage of time that it's almost like we've kind of gone wrong for a while. And interestingly, then that's affected our whole view of health, effectively.
Yes. Yeah, I lived in China for 3 years in 2009. And just being in that environment where they take the body as the functioning holistic whole, there is no separation between the physical body, the brain body, the energetic body, and our environment. They're just all, affected by and of each other, all these systems together, and you cannot separate them from one to the other. And it was such an amazing environment to be in, and a great learning environment to be in. Um, to keep tapping in, looking at it from a very, very different perspective. They work
Mm.
completely on the prevention aspect of things, looking after your body, taking responsibility for your body, doing what you can with it. But because that was where I learned that if your body is your best friend, how's your relationship? At the time, me and my body, we weren't speaking. We'd had a royal falling out. My body had let me down as far as I was concerned. And we'd fallen out. We weren't on speaking terms. But it's such a great question to ask ourselves. If your body's your best friend, how's things right now? And we can be at war with our bodies.
Mm.
We can be ignoring each other. We can, be in different stages of relationship with our body, but ultimately we've got to make friends. As you say, you've got
Yeah,
to.
we've only got the one.
Yes, you only get one house.
Yeah.
But also, our brain is very habitual, and it loves familiarity. and it is a non-discerning entity. So it doesn't matter if that familiar thing is pain, or that familiar thing is cake. If it doesn't matter if it's nice or not nice, or whether it's good or bad. It doesn't work on that. It's just, um, was it there yesterday?
Mm.
And when we get into this cycle of, well, how do we feel today? Because yesterday we had this thing, so we need to
Mm.
check, is it still there? But that means that something inside of you is already looking for it. And I work with this with people that have had back pain for a really long time. It starts to form part of our identity, and we're already looking for it before we've even come, when we're coming through the liminal state into wakefulness. Brain's already like, oh, we had back pain yesterday, we've had it for a really long time, is it still
Mm.
there? And we got ourselves into this little cycle. The other thing is, if we keep asking ourselves how we are, a little bit like if you ask children how they are, if we keep asking the question, something inside us goes, should something be wrong? You're asking the
Exactly.
question. Look, hang on, I'll go and find something that is wrong.
Yeah.
Because you've asked enough times, so there must be something wrong. You can see something I can't. So, should I
Yeah.
go in there and find it?
Yeah. Very, very
So,
true.
and sometimes we do have to be a little bit parent to the child, in that, just stop asking
Yeah.
and trust. And there is a trust element to the brain and the body, and it gets broken sometimes when we experience trauma of any form. Then the trust between the brain and the body gets broken. So, we feel like our body has let us down, so we don't trust that our body will let us know when there's a problem,
Yeah.
because it's got bad before and we've had to have intervention. So that's why that question is recurring all the time. And initially, when we say, well, I'm just not going to ask that question, the brain's like, well, hang on a second, we didn't know when things weren't right before, how will we know again? But of course, over time, we restore that trust in our bodies, that by developing the interoception, so we can ring the
Mm.
changes, and we
Yeah.
can be, there's a truth to it. So, and we've measured this in the lab, that the fascial response back to the brain is anywhere between 3 and 7 minutes. That's a really long time.
That's a very long time.
But the frontal cortex of the brain, that is working on our external environment, when we ask ourselves, how do I feel? In comes the frontal cortex. Well, I feel great because I'm chatting to Wendy and I'm on a podcast, and it's like la 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 la. Or it goes, oh, do you know what? I'm not feeling so great because I had to go outside today and it was raining, and here is the story.
Mm.
And that's really based on our external environment. So if we sit with the question, how do I feel? And let that drop down through the layers of ourselves, eventually we start to feel. And interoception at its basic level is, I'm hungry, I'm cold,
Yeah.
I'm thirsty. But also we have a huge range of interoception, in that we can really feel our internal workings. And when we drop down into that, that helps us to restore the trust to the brain, because we can feel and we can ring the changes. And then we know that our body will let us know if
Yeah.
something is off and something's not quite right. But it also helps us to heal, because we can get a true account of what's really going on within our body. Somebody said to me, I ask myself how I feel, well, my shoulder says it's worse. And I said, well, that's okay. That's a true account of what's going on for you. It's not, oh, it was the same as yesterday.
Yeah.
It might be better. It might be the same. It might be worse. But over time, we can chart how we're doing, and is our overarching progress making, getting better or not, in which case we need to change what we're doing, because we're
Yeah.
we're not going in the direction that we want.
It's so interesting to because a lot of people would talk about it as sort of um your mindset about your state, how you're choosing to feel or see what has happened to you. And I love the fact that you're making the connection of the true feeling within the body, and that is hugely important for you to get to know, like you're talking about the relationship, to get to know your body. And I think when you are recovering from something significant, or even in the past that is significant, that again, back to that acceptance piece that we were discussing before, it's so important to do that in an honest way, rather than the thoughts of where you should be at, or like we were talking about, how far you are through the recovery journey. Just the pure acceptance is a calming thing for your nervous system to allow you to then move forward. So coming back to the situation where someone like you have been is in a position where they want to they know something's not right, they believe that they can improve their movement, improve therefore the way they feel, to be able to access doing more things that perhaps they've been putting as a barrier because of fear, because of what's happened to them in the past. Relating it back to specifically to scar tissue, particularly if they're aware of that, how can they assess whether scar tissue is actually creating an issue for them? And if so, then how can they proceed? What sort of external help would you suggest that they get? And also, what can they do for themselves?
Absolutely. So there's so much that we can work with ourselves. And what I find is really interesting, that whilst the task in hand might be daunting in the beginning, when you take your own body by the hand and say, come on, body, we're gonna do something, your body responds in the most incredible way. It will come and meet you halfway. It may be a little grumpy, because if you'd been ignored a lot, you'd probably be slightly grumpy too. But that kindness and that compassion, I would not be here doing what I'm doing without the team, the squad of people who have supported me over time. As I say, I have been in and out of counselling over time to work through things. If you feel it's, we have these cultural and societal norms that stiff upper lip, and you ask someone how they are and they go fine, and I love that, because if someone goes fine, I say, okay, again,
How are you really?
how are you
Yes.
really?
Yeah.
Because and
Always ask twice.
do
I
we
love
need
that. Always
coffee?
ask twice.
Do we need
Yeah.
coffee? And a space, because but we are taught and conditioned as kids, just rub it better, just pull yourself together, just keep going.
Mm.
And thankfully the tides are changing for that now, and we are being far more compassionate with ourselves and allowing ourselves the healing processes that we deserve. But get support, because and there's more support available to us now. So if there's something that you feel is not quite right, go with that. Go and speak to somebody and get some help with that. I work with a scar worker. So scar work is a relatively new kid on the block, but it's a really powerful, very gentle, non-invasive type of, use the word massage loosely, because it's not even really a massage. It's very,
So it's
very
a manual
gentle.
therapy.
It is a manual therapy. If
Yeah.
you've got adhesions that are severely restricting your movement, particularly around a joint, so if you're unable to take your arm above your head, or you've got restrictions around the hip area, those major joints, then that therapy will help the scar tissue to free up and start moving. I love to work one-to-one with people, because I just feel like a group environment for me. I don't like the word complex needs, but I do have complex needs.
Yeah.
And I don't feel that the group setting is quite right when you've got that that kind of level of complex needs. Having said that, I do run a group for people with complex needs, but it's a small group setting and it's very interactive. And I think, if you are going to go into that, be in a space where the person who's taking you through that process, you're able to ask your questions and you're having them answered in a way that you can understand, and a way that makes your body happy and your brain happy, because like I say, you have to keep going through the safe process. And starting into that, a gentle tailored movement, so movement that is specific for joint replacements or whatever kind of surgery that you've been through, scar specific and body sympathetic sessions, someone who is skilled in that area
and
will be able
asking
to
the
help
right
you.
questions. So hopefully, having listened to this podcast, understanding that that is a specific need, that it's important that that person that you're working with really understands how that scarring could potentially be affecting the movement. That's a good sort of test question to give people, isn't it, really? Because obviously if there's a blank response or a lack of understanding, particularly if this podcast has resonated with you, then you're with the wrong person.
Yes. And initially, and this is true of my own training as well, when I trained as a yoga teacher in 2007, and even though I did a 3.5-year postgrad degree in that, when I came away, the anatomy and physiology module that I had done just wasn't even close to what I was being presented with the people in front of me.
Right.
And it didn't match up, which is why I spend a lot of time in sort of fascia research in the dissection lab, looking at adhesions, looking at scar tissue specifically. But that version of anatomy and physiology is very, very far removed from what we see in our traditional textbooks and is taught in those sort of movement teacher trainings. And my teacher and I are moving quite heavily towards a higher level of anatomy and physiology training for all Pilates, whether it's Pilates, yoga, massage, whatever it is, because the standards there can be in some courses not enough, because a lot of things are based on an old style of movement. We need a modern movement for modern bodies. We replaced 167,000 hips and knees in the UK alone in 2017. That's an awful lot of people walking into a movement class having had that kind of surgery. That's not to mention, back things, frozen shoulders, and all of those other things. So I think for movement and movement teachers, raising our game so that we can support people better that are coming through our doors. But also, I think as from a client point of view, asking, like you say, the right questions of the tutor. Are they offering something that is sympathetic to your particular circumstances?
And so, and then on the self massage, so to leave people with a practical tip that they can go off and go and do right now.
Yes.
Is there anything that you would suggest that has worked for you and your clients?
Yeah. So your body's built in spirals. Nothing's linear, but you knew that already. So when I saw my scar worker for the first time, nobody had ever touched my scar, including me, in 20 years. Because this is, when we haven't quite accepted the journey that we've been on, we don't feel very connected to the part of us that has been affected. So we can tend to dissociate a little bit, and we can ignore, and we don't look, and let alone touch. And we humans are touch based. We respond incredibly well to touch. So if we're starting to work with our scars, we can just olive oil or coconut oil, or you can have some really Gucci, nice smelling, lovely oils, whatever you like, but just making just those little circles, really smooth, really gentle. Make sure your hands are warm. um,
Yes.
I've always got cold hands, particularly for those of us that have got little or no sensitivity. It can feel a little odd, particularly if that's a new experience for you. So, not having any feeling between my sort of mid ribs all the way down to my hip at one point. Somebody would come up and this is, old 80s and 90s stuff. We don't do this so much anymore. But if you were standing, at the bar or something, and someone would come up and just touch you around the waist, you'd find me embedded in the ceiling because I can't feel you properly.
Yeah.
And that would, trigger a stress response in and a startle reflex from the brain. So it would make me physically jump. So, just being very, very gentle, very, very compassionate with that, and let the brain rattle off what it wants to rattle off, because initially it'd be like, oh, I can't feel anything. Loves a catastrophe, does our brain as well. Can't feel a lot. But this starts the process of accepting where we are, because if we don't know where we are with ourselves, then we can't start the journey to healing that. So, and use it as a treat as well, I think is always really important. When we start with these things, we are a reward based monkey. So, it's like, well, I'm going to have this nice massage. It might bring up some things, but it's okay because, there's a nice scented candle, or there's a piece of chocolate at the end, or, there's always there's a payoff for it. But just those lovely circly movements, and just notice what moves and slides easily, and then maybe where we're running into resistances. And you can get to know your own scar very well through that. And that's not to say that when we run into resistance, we get in there and have a bit of a ruggle and see if we can free it up, in inverted commas. But if we keep coming into these nice circly movements, then yes, it does free up. We do restore some of the slide and glide to it. But, if we fell and we hurt ourselves, then our primary carer would pick us up and rub it better. Same thing, just as adults. So, the brain and the body soothe and respond very well to that very gentle touch. And we're just looking, just like I say, that movement on the skin on the back of your hand is the same in all areas of your body. We're just looking for that, small range of movement. And the same with movements for the body. So, like I say, I work with people with, mastectomy scars and those lumpectomy scars, those sorts of things. And all we start with is just fingers on the shoulder and little circles with the elbow, just to get the brain and the body involved in what we want to do. We don't go for big flashy moves. We're not interested in that. Can I make little circles with my elbow? And the brain goes, well, yeah, of course I can. Yeah, that's great. This is the starting point for us. Yeah. The same with hip replacements. Can we make little circles with the knees? Knee replacements. Can we make little circles with the heels? Can we do that? And the brain goes, yes, I can do that. So we start with that, restoring that sporadic range of movement to the joint. And the brain says, is it safe? Well, yeah, of course it is. It's only little circles. And then we keep, we can sneak things up on the,
yes.
And just gently start to reintroduce, because as soon as we've got that, and the brain goes, yeah, of course I can do that. Well, could we do something more? Well, yeah, of course we can. Come on in, says the brain. And so, we do a little bit more and a bit more. And we gradually start to just broaden the ranges of what we feel is possible for us. And we've got both people in the boat at the same time, moving together.
That's amazing. That's really, really inspiring as well, because I think a lot of people in this position are perhaps, as you said right earlier on, fighting against the situation they're in. So thank you so much for sharing your time today, because you've informed us hugely, and you've inspired as well, because I've loved the direction of the conversation, because it really is about the intertwined nature of how our brain affects our body and vice versa, that understanding that more fully can mean that we can become more empowered, learn more, become more curious and move forward. So thank you so much for your time, Caz. And I will be listing in the show notes where everyone can find you. If you could just tell us your website address in case people want to hear
Of
it.
course. Yes. And I love to hear your questions. So if there's a lot of people out there with a whole lot of questions. And,
A lot of questions.
we don't always have access to the people who can give us answers to those questions. So if you want to pop me your questions, you're very welcome. But yeah, gravitytechnique.com. You can book in for an informal chat with me, find out about, my one-to-one services and, my post-surgery group that meet on Zoom a couple of times a week. So, and just tells you a little bit more about what I do and my area of speciality. And, you're not, you're never stuck with what you have. The surgery is the door that opens. And from there, you've got great opportunity to move forward, because very often it solves a problem or it gives us a window of opportunity for us to start the work. If we've been in significant amounts of pain previously, then the surgery changes that game completely, but it's just the first step towards the whole rest of your life, really.
I always love hearing my guests' movement stories or learning from them about topics they're passionate about. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and if you have, you can help by doing 3 things. First, press the follow button to tell podcast platforms you want to listen again. Second, please give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review about why you liked it. And third, I'd love you to share it with friends and family or on your socials, for which I'm truly thankful. Finally, if this podcast is making you want to start reclaiming your own movement, join me in the Reclaim Movement membership for classes, both live and by replay, and countless videos of mini movement breaks to add into your daily life, covering practical and fun, important natural movements. Visit reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to get started with your 7-day free trial. See you for the next episode, and thank you so much for listening.